and welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we are doing in the evening here in Manila, Philippines on Thursday. Joining me on Thursday afternoon in Milano, Italia, Tim Bontemps.
I've been sitting here for 12 hours, so waiting to start. So I'm glad we're ready to go now.
That's right. He sent a text at 11 a.m. Philippine time, which 12 hours ago. And it's like, okay, why aren't you guys signed on? Joining us from Dallas, Texas, where it's 10 a.m. It's Thursday morning. It's Bam MacMahon.
Howdy, partners.
No other comment on Bontemps?
I'll let you international superstars carry the day here. I'm just a common man sitting in good old US of A.
All right, that's where you belong, quite frankly. All right, so we're going to talk about the NBA. James Harden, a story from our colleague Ramona Shelburne, the first sort of glimpse into the James Harden situation. This is basically a summation piece that Ramona did, but it had some remarkable details that were in it. I'll never forget the piece that you did on James Harden at MacMahon. What was that? Maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
It was right as he was forcing his way out of Houston.
Right. At the same time, I don't know if that. But just it took a lot longer to get there in Houston than it did in Philadelphia.
Yeah, it sort of pulled back some of the curtain on what was up with Harden, and I think we have a little bit more here. There's a couple of, look, he still wants to be traded. Philly still has him off the block and is intending to bring him to camp. It's still a stalemate. That hasn't changed, but there's a little bit more that Ramona unearthed about what went on this past season. The two pieces I think are interesting. Not that I think, again, this changes the Harden situation, but a story, a detail on the story about how Harden, during a week when the 76ers had lost 2 brutal home games, I think it was in January. Do you remember who those games were against, Bontemps? I can't remember.
They lost to Boston and they lost to Milwaukee, I believe, and then they were going to Miami.
Right. So two teams they're trying to beat in the Eastern Conference. And James Harden did not fly with the team to Miami. He went ahead of the team to Miami to enjoy the nightlife. And Ramona detailed that in there. And she also detailed about at the All-Star game, how James Harden was offered by the NBA, by Adam Silver, to be an injury replacement. And he didn't answer right away, and the NBA was waiting on an answer and didn't get an answer in a timely enough fashion. And so Adam Silver named Pascal Siakam. And I think and I don't want to give away the whole story. I mean, those are interesting nuggets from it. You should read it, because Ramona basically details that this was supposed to be a season of sacrifice for James Harden, and it ended up going sideways, and that sort of set the agenda for his trade request after after he didn't get a contract situation settled. But I think these details kind of illustrate that while the Sixers were having a good season, there was some cracks in the way it was operating with Harden, and that it led sort of things that built up. And it just speaks nothing to the Doc Rivers dismissal, which was related to the team's performance and dropping a 3-2 lead in the playoffs, no doubt. If they win that series, I think there's a good chance Doc Rivers is still the coach. But Harden played a role in Doc Rivers getting fired. So I think all of these things are just more detail, more background to understand why the 76ers looked at his future one way and Harden looked at it another. Bontemps.
Yeah, I mean, look, this situation, we're still in sort of a holding pattern over the last couple months, and I think Ramona did a good job of explaining how we got to this point. But the most important paragraph in the story was the one where she essentially said the Sixers looked around at trade options. Nobody's really interested in trading for James Harden, and so he's still here, and there's no real end in that situation in sight. And certainly the details about the All-Star game, I didn't know about that. There was obviously some tension with Doc throughout the year. And James, as we've talked about before, when he sat up there after that game one against the Celtics, when he had 40 something and basically said it felt great to be the guy again, you had a pretty good sense of sort of where his head was at in terms of, the role he had and sort of what he wanted to have in an ideal world. But at the end of the day, James Harden and his agents opted into this contract because they were not comfortable with the situation where they sat a couple days before free agency. And because they did that, there's no off ramp for them. And everything that happened, that's really all that matters. Is I just still, as of right now, what are we, 4 weeks from training camp, 3.5 weeks from training camp? I just don't see how James Harden gets out of this situation outside of showing up to camp and playing. And maybe he'll just sabotage this Phillies entire season. It'll just be a disaster for everybody. But right now, I just don't see any way this ends other than him playing for the Sixers in a few weeks.
Yeah, and I'm reading this story, and obviously there are some parts, specifically the whole fly ahead of the team so he can go party in Miami, where I'm like, listen, some things are never going to change with James Harden. I mean, he is one of the most legendary partiers in NBA history. That's never going to change. And some things have changed drastically, obviously, specifically his relationship with Daryl Morey. And let's just call it like it is. For years, Daryl Morey thought it was good business to kiss James Harden's butt. He kissed James's ass the entire time in Houston. The power dynamic, James wasn't reporting up to Daryl. It was the other way around. That's just
he could argue he's been doing that most of the time he's been in Philadelphia.
Well, and clearly that has changed. The whole, he was ghosting me. And I'm not buying this. Oh, Daryl's never tampering again. We're following the rules. No, he basically was like, it was a way of playing hardball. He had never played hardball with James Harden before. Good, exactly the opposite. But it reached a point like Daryl's not a relationships guy. He's a straight up business guy. He wasn't kissing James's butt because he wanted to be his friend. He was doing it because he thought it was in the best interest of, at the time, the Houston Rockets. At this point, it's not in the best interest of the Philadelphia 76ers. So that relationship is totally flipped. James clearly feels betrayed. I mean, Ramona lays that out very well. Let me just point out one thing, though. Let's not act like James was just always loyal to Daryl Morey. In this specific case, what did James think was going to happen this entire year? He thought he was going to get a max deal and go back to Houston. Okay? That was his plan. So let's not, oh my gosh, how could Daryl stab him in the back? James can feel betrayed, but, so could Daryl. And the simple fact of the matter is this little friendship, it was never about the relationship. It was about the business. And the business has gotten messy, and so the relationship's been blown to smithereens.
It was always a mutually beneficial. It was always a mutually beneficial situation. And the true irony of the situation is that James Harden's biggest fan in the NBA remains Daryl Morey. Yeah. After all of this, he wants James Harden more than any other team in the league. That's the funniest thing about this whole thing. He wants him in Philadelphia. He wants him to be on the team. There's no other team that's rushing to try to trade for him. You mentioned Houston. That when that option went away, it wasn't like there was other stuff on the market. There's a reason they opted in. They were terrified they were going to be left without anything. I think that was a mistake, but that was why they did it. They didn't do it because they wanted to be in Philadelphia. It's like they were not sure what they were going to get, so they took what they had, and that sums up the situation entirely.
The Houston interest angle, which seems to have shifted both with the availability and interest of Fred VanVleet, plus the hiring of Ime Udoka, plus the way the season went for James Harden. But the Houston interest angle or, factor is the best defense that the Sixers have, that they didn't have a wink-wink agreement in place. Because even though a Houston interest, whether, when that came out, could have been used as a leveraging move to get Philly to give Harden the contract. It did make some sense that Houston would have interest in bringing him back. It was very clear that the Rockets wanted to spend money and wanted to improve quickly, and that not all ties had been burned there. So that is something that's interesting to point out, is you try to assume who promised who what and who was experiencing what. But we are, media day is October 2nd. So we're now inside a month. There's still plenty of time for stuff to happen, but I still have no idea what's going to happen there. And I have no idea whether he's going to report to training camp. If he does, what he's going to do. And it's a very uneasy situation. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of uncertainty in the league right now. There has been for a while. And now that training camp is, in the forefront. I mean, after Labor Day is when the players usually start reporting to their facilities. Like September is when everybody kind of shows up and starts playing. And so, in Philadelphia, they're getting going here, and they don't know who's going to be on the team. And it's like, it's like a storm on the horizon. Everybody knows it's going to come to a head, but there doesn't seem to be anybody doing anything about it. So Ramona's story highlights that. Okay, so we'll continue to watch that. Over here in Manila at the World Cup, had a quite an interesting couple of days here. So this pod will be out, not too far from when the United States plays Germany for the semifinals. We're a little bit off our schedule here because that game is at on early Friday morning, mid, and not so early, but certainly early for the West Coast. The Americans played terrific against Italy, but I was totally enraptured by the two games that I watched on Wednesday night here in Manila. One was Slovenia against Canada, and the other one was Latvia against Germany. The Slovenia against Canada game, I really wish we had mic'd up Dylan Brooks and mic'd up Luka Doncic, because it was pure theater to watch those two guys go against each other. And I guess you could say predictably, both of them were ejected. And
I would say very predictably, especially in a FIBA game.
Watching this game unfold was entertaining, to be honest with you. Luka, of course, absolutely complained about just about every time he was touched. The thing about it is Canada was playing very physical with him. It's very frustrating to watch Luka play, but in this game, he had a point. He was getting hit every time, essentially down the court. And of course, he was complaining about it. And this is the problem when you complain about every call. The officials get numb to it. They walk into the building knowing you're going to complain about every call. So, it gives you no basis to have a conversation with them. And so, like, the Slovenia bench is going absolutely crazy every time. The coach is flailing around. Luka's flailing around. Luka's grabbing his quad. He's grabbing his elbow. He's grimacing. And then he's absolutely cooking the defenders in front of him.
He's doing the thing where he shows the marks on his hands, on his arms. That's a constant.
He was playing brilliantly, but watching him was excruciating. And meanwhile, Dylan Brooks wouldn't go 2 feet from him as much as long as he possibly could. When he would get shaken on the court, okay, he'd get away. But in dead balls, he'd be right up in his face. He'd be chirping at him. I was talking to somebody on the Canada team, and they were telling me that in the game where the Canadians beat the Spanish to get a huge win, where they had a fourth quarter comeback to get to the quarterfinals and qualify for the Olympics, they couldn't believe the kind of stuff that Dylan Brooks was saying to Santi Aldama, his ex-teammate on the Grizzlies. Like, they were like, I couldn't believe the words he was using. Now, Santi seemed to apparently take it okay and give it back to him, but like Dillon Brooks is relentless. And so Luka's going back at Dillon. Dillon's going back at Luka. He's playing rough. They're rotating Dillon and Lou Dort, which is a great combination to put on Luka. Luka is still scoring. It's a slugfest. It's a 1-point game at halftime. And then the third quarter, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander just takes control. He ended up, I think, with 31 points and 10 assists in this game. Starts stretching it out. Luka starts getting frustrated. Dillon keeps barking. Dillon Brooks hits a three, forces the Slovenia timeout, barks, gets ejected for taunting. Okay. So it was a double-digit lead.
By the way, you forgot the part where the Manila crowd is just booing.
Oh, you're right.
Dillon
I
Brooks
apologize.
From intros through the entire game, because he is a villain.
Okay.
Because they are Lakers lovers.
That's right.
That's going back to the playoffs.
I'm so sorry. I mean, they do like Luka here, but they were booing. It
was a combination of liking Luka and really hating Dillon Brooks.
Yeah, I was talking to a guy in the media here in the Philippines, and he's like, when you say something against LeBron or you say something against Kobe, it's like insulting the Filipino culture. Mm-hmm. And so they booed him. And like at one point in the game when Slovenia was trying to make a comeback, the Filipino fans were chanting defense when Slovenia was defending.
That's the one English word that Luka does not understand.
So Luka is riding the officials every time, and he's getting so frustrated. And again, he is getting hit. I mean, this is the thing. Like he is, by the letter of the law, he is right. They were beating him up, but he's just going crazy. So he gets a technical foul in the first half for complaining. Mm-hmm. In the second half, he's complaining. Slovenia is getting behind. And when there would be free throws, he would walk over towards center court, and he started yelling at the front row of seats. And I was like, who is he yelling at? And I asked some people, and he was yelling at Andreas Zaklis, who is the Secretary General of FIBA.
That's the commissioner of FIBA for people who don't know what the Secretary General is.
It's
the Adam Silver of FIBA. Yes.
Right. It would be like if, Adam Silver usually sits in like, the fifth or sixth row, like on the aisle when he's.
It'd be like if Luka went over to the stands at a playoff game, started shouting at Adam Silver that the refs were not calling fouls on. That was what happened. Right. So Dillon gets ejected. Now, the game is not over. There's, it's the fourth quarter. There's time left. And within a minute or two, Luka barks at the officials and gets a second technical, gets ejected, immediately walks to the tunnel, looks over at the FIBA leadership with Zach Lees and all the other leaders who are sitting together, and starts clapping at them. Like, good job. And then actually Slovenia made a minor comeback there, and you wonder what would have happened if he had stayed in the game. And then he didn't actually he did leave the court, but he was kind of standing in the tunnel with a towel over his head. Like, I don't know if he was trying like Bobby Valentine or something. But the Canadians eventually pushed it out and ended up, winning and eliminating Slovenia from medal contention. Canada's coming off of the court, and Dillon Brooks is standing in the hallway wearing boxing gloves, shadow boxing when they come off the court. Now, the background on that is the Canadian. I saw the Canadian coaches had been telling them, like, you've got to keep giving body blows to the other team throughout the tournament. They talked about it against Spain when they come back. And then so before the game against Slovenia, they put boxing gloves in all the lockers. So then you have this amazing video of Dillon Brooks.
It's just another
boxing.
It's like
in the hallway.
Yeah,
it was incredible.
It's like the old pounding the rock concept. It's just another way of selling it to the players.
But it gave us an incredible video though of Dillon Brooks wearing boxing gloves in the hallway.
I just
shadow boxing,
which Dillon knew. Dillon knew because he was perfectly positioned for the cameras to see.
Of course.
I just wish the media would stop portraying him as a villain. He has said he does not like that. So stop doing things like pressing forward and documenting all of his actions.
Here's the thing. Dillon played awesome against Spain.
And he played awesome against Slovenia.
And getting both Dillon and Luka ejected is like trading your king for your rook.
Yeah.
But
your knight.
the whole reason Dillon is so valuable is because he's defending Luka. So if he gets Luka so frustrated that Luka gets ejected, who cares if Dillon's still in the game?
Well, if Dillon Brooks is 5 for 7 from the field and 3 for 5 from three, then he's a very valuable player, because then he's not taking up possessions, taking terrible shots, messing up your offense. He's hitting open shots and he's guarding. If he played like that all the time in the NBA, there'd be much less of an issue with Dillon Brooks as far as being a damaging player.
And for all the antics, you heard what Luka had to say about Dillon Brooks after the game. And Wendy, you were there. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but basically gave him his props. And, say what you want about, the villain, the offense, all that stuff. Dillon Brooks might be the best wing defender or on-ball defender in the NBA. It's crazy because if it's not him, Lou Dort's right there in that conversation as well. And they're both sitting there, as you said, a tag team defending Luka in that game. But this game, Luka has two massive flaws. One, he's done something about this summer. He's gotten himself into shape. But the conditioning is something that it's always going to be, a year-to-year, month-to-month even type of situation with him as far as his commitment. The exhausting whining to referees is never going to change. And there's some issues there. Like if he wants to whine, that's one thing, but it's counterproductive. Like you said, you said they're numb to it. I think in a lot of cases, and especially, with these FIBA referees who are getting hammered all the time, I think it's counterproductive. I think they get so sick and tired of it. Like, dude, these are humans. There's going to be a human element. And if the human element is, I am sick and tired of hearing this bleepity bleep MF me, I'm like, he ain't getting the benefit of the doubt. I think that does happen a lot. And then Luka, this is something Jason Kidd has called him out on publicly on multiple occasions. It was a major source of frustration for Rick Carlisle, but Rick was just in butt kissing, trying to fix the relationship mode, so wouldn't call Luka out on it. Luka gets so worked up about the officials, he's not playing 5-on-5. He's more worried about 3 refs than he is the 5 opponents. And when one of those guys is Dillon Brooks, who's in your grill, it's going to be tough. And Luka got tossed midway through the fourth quarter. He was checked out in the third quarter. He was done. He was arguing with refs. He was done playing basketball.
He was talking to the executives on the stands.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So he did come to the podium after the game, which the Slovenian, team really can't ever make him talk to the media. So that was his decision to come to, which I respected. And here's what he said. He said, I know I complain a lot, but I don't think it's fair. They're playing very physical with me. But if you say that, it's not fair. They talked about Dillon Brooks. He said he's very physical, like he always is. A lot of people don't like him, but I respect him for what he does. He does that stuff pretty good. Both the coach and Luka admit that he needs to get better. And I mean, while I think he comes in and I respect that he comes in and discusses it, he's not getting better. And last year,
like literally dozens of times throughout the course of his NBA career and FIBA career.
Yeah, he's the boy who cried wolf at this point.
Yeah. Well, he got ejected. So when Slovenia got knocked out of Eurobasket last year, and by the way, like incredibly great respect to him that he's playing in summer after summer for the Slovenian national team. Yeah. Like he's the biggest name player here. I think this game might have had a, comment on who the best player, the best, guard in FIBA has been, because Shai Gilgeous-Alexander outplayed him. I mean, look, we always say Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
You're jumping on that.
I'm telling you what happened.
Has been driving.
I'm telling you what happened. I don't, I'm not making an opinion. It's just a fact. He outplayed him head to head. He outplayed him.
I hear a bunch of whining. From my neighbors here in Dallas. There's 7 NBA players on Canada. If Luka had 7 NBA players, simple fact is SGA outplayed him yesterday. That's the truth. Now, he wasn't being defended by Dylan Brooks and Lou Dort, but SGA outplayed him.
Here's his line: 31 points on 8 for 12 shooting, 7 for 8 from 2, 14 for 16 from the line, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, 1 turnover, 36 minutes.
Oh, more whining. Good. Why didn't Luka have 16 free throws?
Well, he was averaging 14 plus, and then he got to the last 2 games, and I think he only had 12 total in the last 2 games, which I'm sure Luka fans would point to. Now, I'm just going to point to this. I mentioned him playing in Eurobasket for Slovenia last summer. In the game where they got eliminated, he got ejected from that game for complaining.
Yeah.
So, look, I mean, I admit, I've talked about this game in the past. The game, and it was actually almost in the same sort of part of the tournament, not quite the quarterfinals, but Giannis got a preposterous whistle in the last World Cup. And I remember watching it saying, I don't know if he's going to want to keep playing because they can just beat him up. And, it's not, and maybe FIBA isn't for Luka. I mean, he really, really wants, I respect it, but I don't think allow. Well, I'm just saying, if he is not going to be able to control his emotions, I don't know if he's going to be able to continue doing it.
Well, I would say this:
they allow it.
The best moments of Luka's career have been in FIBA for all the success he's had in the NBA.
Well, and with Real Madrid
and going to the Olympics are the best moments in Luka's career. And it's never a question: is he going to be playing for Slovenia? He has said it many, many times. As long as he's healthy, he's playing with his national team. I mean, this is. If you're looking for, hey, does Luka have a strong sense of loyalty? He sure as hell does when it comes to Slovenia. Obviously, people in Dallas hopes that carries over to the business relationship that he has with the Mavericks. But I think it's going to take more than frustration with officials for Luka to run away from the chance to compete in FIBA. Let's be honest, if it was about frustration with officials, he'd just retire from basketball. Because he whines in the NBA on a every play basis too.
It's just so hard to watch. He's so brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
He put a few moves on in this game that were just, nothing, and you guys haven't seen before. And then there was this one back and forth in the third quarter where he had a step back 3-pointer from an inch off the sideline. I don't know. It was 27 feet. Just a breathtaking play. And maybe that was in the second quarter. And then Shai came down at the other end and hit his own step back.
It was in the third. That was when he checked out of the game, to MacMahon's point, because he and Shai went back and forth a couple times, and Luka was trying to get them back within 10, and it stayed around 15. And then that was when the frustration really set in. And then that was kind of that. And to me, this isn't about, like MacMahon said, this isn't about, is FIBA for Luka or not? To me, this is about if Luka Doncic has the potential to be the best player on the planet and one of the great players of all time. Mm-hmm. But for him to kind of get to the final endpoint of what he can be as a player, he has to get past this endless whining and complaining to the refs. Because if you're so focused, to MacMahon's point, on the court, on the referees, and not on the opponent, it's going to naturally affect your team, which, as you said, Brian, the whole team sort of takes after him naturally because he's clearly their leader and best player. And
they complain as much as any team. It
was bad. It was bad.
And you're going to take your cues from your best player. And if your best player is getting that distracted by the officials, that's not to say Luka's an unbelievable player. It's not. There's no criticism of him from that standpoint. But that's the last thing he's got to really get over is a maturity on the court to not allow that stuff to completely derail him. And there's moments where it clearly does.
That's the thing. Look, Chris Paul complains as much as anybody in the league. We can talk about Draymond Green.
And you could argue it's cost Chris Paul a bunch of times too, in similar cases, from getting so emotionally invested with the referees that it impacted other things. Look at the Scott
It's
Foster
cost Draymond
relationship.
too. It's
For
cost
sure.
Draymond too.
2016.
Right.
Same thing.
And yep. The thing that J Kidd has tried to emphasize to Luka has really, tried to hammer on him, pick your spots. And maybe the most frustrating thing about Luka's constant complaining to referees is he does it when 9 other guys are going the other way. Like, he's one of the worst transition defenders in the history of basketball, because half the time, I mentioned earlier in another pod, a scout actually said that. I thought he had like analytical evidence. He was just kind of being what's the word?
Hyperbolic. There you
Anyways, but like, dude, don't stop. The game doesn't stop because you're upset. When the whistle blows, if you got something to say it then. But don't do all this pointing at your hand, point at your arms, pointing at the marks, throwing your hands up, yelling and screaming when you're supposed to be running back on defense. And that is a constant with him. And then it's
such a great player too. He's such a great player. It honestly, it's not that it ruins watching him, because if he's not complaining about the officials, he's limping and he's grabbing and
he can be exhausting. He can absolutely be exhausting, but for a while, obviously the kid came in. He came in as a kid. He's not a kid anymore. He came in as a kid. He came in as a teenager. And so for a while, you talked about, well, it's immaturity. Let's stop that. It's his personality. It's who he is. That doesn't make him a bad guy, but it is a personality flaw that affects the performance of one of the best players in the league. It's just like, listen, Rasheed Wallace never grew out of it.
Right.
It's who he is. And this is part of the package with perennial first team All-NBA Luka Doncic. It's just part of the package, something that is constantly going to have to be managed. And, that's also why, like, part of covering Luka Doncic is the technical foul count. How close is he to that suspension? And the last 2 years, he's gotten 17, but the NBA was unfair. Those refs were unfair twice each year. So he avoided a suspension because, he didn't have to yell at Adam Silver in front of an entire arena. The Mavericks did it behind the scenes, but he got 2 rescinded. But like, it's always going to be, hey, is he running back on defense? How close is he to a suspension? Is he so focused on the officials that, he's committing turnovers? He's throwing up bad shots. He just completely loses his mind. Like this year, the example that comes to mind is they're up, I forgot how many points. It was, at the time, it was the biggest comeback in the NBA all season. It was like 29 points or something against the Lakers. Didn't end up being the biggest comeback of the year, but at the time it was. And Luka just lost his mind, got so focused on, arguing with the refs and whining to the refs. The Mavericks completely melted down. The Lakers came back and won the game in Dallas. And that's when, for the third or fourth time during their time together, J Kidd called it out post-game.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they've played since this game. They played tonight against Lithuania in a consolation game. I was surprised. Again, hats off to Luka. Luka played the second night of a back-to-back, basically in the losers bracket. Yeah. And he had 29 points, but didn't shoot the ball well, 7 of 21, and they lost again to Lithuania. It is bad couple of days. Bad couple of days for Luka.
These games are just about, are you going to be 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th place? Like,
there's some method to it because it affects your potential seeding in the Olympic qualifying tournament. So one thing I will say, when Slovenia lost that game, it cemented the Olympic bids for Europe in the hands of Serbia and Germany. And so that means that the Serbians are still very alive going into the game against Canada in the semifinals on Friday, have got their bid in Paris, which means despite Nikola Jokic taking the summer to rest after the finals, he's going to be in Paris. That's not good news the rest of the world.
Are you sure he's going to be in Paris?
No, I'm not sure, of course, but they didn't qualify for
he
the last.
Wants and he's healthy, he can play. Like his spot is.
Well, listen,
I'd be pretty surprised if he didn't play in the Olympics.
So I was reading an interview that Sergio Mendes gave. He's the former coach of Argentina, had a lot of success with the Argentinian national team, and he picked Serbia to win. Out of the 4 teams remaining, he picked Serbia, and he said it was because of their defense. And he pointed out that Lithuania scored 110 points against the U.S., and then they only scored 68 against Serbia. Now, I will tell you, Lithuania shot the heck out of the ball against the U.S., and then missed 19 of 21 3-pointers at one point against Serbia. And then they came back in tonight's game against Slovenia and shot 56% against on 3. Now, was that variance or was that Serbia's defense? Sergio Hernandez, a man with multiple medals, both in the World Cup and the Olympics, says that was Serbia's defense, and he's picked them to beat Canada and the winner of U.S.-Germany. So take that for what it's worth. But Serbia is in. And friend of the podcast, Bogdan Bogdanovic, got them into the quarterfinals in the Olympics with a brilliant performance. He had a stretch. They lost to Italy. Serbia lost to Italy about 5 or 6 days ago. And Bogdan got benched in that game because he missed like 12 or 13 shots at one point. And so he came back with a huge performance in the quarterfinal. I think he had 24. And I talked to him after the game, and first off, he says hello to you and Bontemps, MacMahon. He's,
well, howdy, partner.
Very, very excited he was excited about everything.
He's a great guy.
He's very, very excited, very happy. And so he gets a chance to play in the semifinals, and, at least one influential voice believes Serbia can beat Canada. Nikola Jovic, who's going into second year with the Miami Heat, has had a couple of really good games for them, as has Stefan Jovic, who's playing. Serbia's playing kind of without a pure point guard because Vasily Micic, get to know that name. He has been he was the MVP of the EuroLeague this year and has signed to play with the Oklahoma City Thunder. But Micic is not playing. So they're kind of playing without Jokic, who's their super duper star, and Micic, who's their point guard. Right. And so anyway, Serbia is in the Olympics, and so is Jokic if he wants it. And so that's going to be interesting. I believe if Jokic showed up tomorrow, 20 minutes before the game, that Serbia might win this World Cup. I'm being a little bit facetious, but I don't see how the U.S. would stop him.
Slovenia will still have a shot at it, but they're going to have to get in there the hard way, which is what they did last time. That's a good point by you that these games can affect the seeding. Last time they had to go through Lithuania in Lithuania.
Might have to again.
So those Olympic qualifying tournaments, those are going to be a lot.
Yeah.
So it's going to be very interesting. We probably should talk about the Canadians for a second. We just went right by them having the best tournament they've ever had.
Yeah, shout out to Jordi Fernandez, their head coach, Spanish head coach, who is assistant with the Sacramento Kings, getting them into the World semifinals. I don't know if they've been there.
They've never finished. They've never finished in the top 4 in the World Cup ever, and they've won 1 Olympic medal, which was in 1936. So, in basically any sort of modern basketball, this is easily the best tournament they've ever had.
So RJ Barrett has been up and down like he is for the Knicks. He was up against Slovenia at 24 points. When his offense is going and Shai's playing well, they're very hard to handle because they have a very good defensive team, because they have Lou Dort, because they have Dylan Brooks. Obviously, the Canadians will be, and let me just say real quick, if Canada and the United States advance out of Friday, and that's a big if. I don't know if they're going to. We'll talk about the U.S. and Germany here in a second. It's potentially the beginning of a long, long, long rivalry at the highest level. These two teams are stocked with NBA players. They both know they're going to the to the Olympics next year in Paris, I, for one, would love to see a home and home in the run-up games. Let's see the Canadians come to Vegas to play the U.S., and on the way to France, let's see the Americans stop in Toronto
Let's
and
do
play
it.
at Scotiabank Arena. Let's see both games sell out and foster this rivalry, which could be about to start.
Can you go somewhere other than Vegas? It's so damn hot there. Toronto in the summer sounds phenomenal. But I like the idea. I like Windy putting on his little marketing hat. Hey, Windy's warming up as a marketer. He's planning live shows, scheduling home and home, national team contests. This is great.
Hey, let's have a live show in Toronto if that game takes place.
Absolutely. Windy's on board. I love it.
I would love to be in Toronto for a July date, USA versus Canada.
How loaded could Canada be next year? Like, dude, they've got several big-time NBA players who aren't there right now. Jamal Murray, Andrew Wiggins, the two guys who were quality rookies for the Pacers this year.
So the Canadians have established a rule that they want you to play 3 summers in a row. Last summer, this summer, to play next summer. Jamal Murray came to training camp and then, sort of put in his time and, said he just wasn't ready to play, but he definitely was there.
Jamal Murray will be in Paris if he's healthy.
Well, you can imagine trying to score on Canada if they had Wiggins, Dort, and Dillon Brooks. And by the way, say whatever you want to say about Dillon Brooks.
Not a bad defender.
No, and when
that's right.
SGA's locked in, he can be a very good defender.
Tremendous length. When Dillon Brooks is locked in, he's tremendous. And, this is what Houston is spending $80 million on. I was still surprised they guaranteed him the full 4 years. What was it?
86, but who's counting? Up to
86 million. I'm sorry, Dylan. I didn't want to short you. I saw Dylan before the game and I congratulated him on his contract, and I was dead serious because congratulations.
Hey, Dylan, one thing about Dillon Brooks, he's always locked in. Now, he might go too far and he might, go a little haywire. But as far you don't have to worry about is Dillon Brooks going to be committed to playing intense defense. He is always locked in.
Yeah. So the Canadians have the Serbians, and that's going to be a tough one. They got to deal with Bogdan.
Big rest advantage for Serbia. Played the first quarterfinal game. Canada played the last semifinal game, and then they're playing the early game on Friday.
Hey, Dylan got about 7 or 8 minutes of extra rest getting ready for Bogdan. I'll tell you that, because our buddy's going to see a whole lot of Dillon Brooks and a whole lot of Lou Dort.
Well, and to put a point on the SGA Luka thing, Bruce, real quick, my only point really from the beginning was that I think you can make an argument those guys are at least on the same level. And I think you've seen in this tournament, I think that SGA is on a similar level to Luka. And I think you saw in that game, he did outplay him, but the difference in that game was he was better than him, but also he is surrounded by 6 or 7 NBA players. And so as good as Luka is, you can see the clear difference as the game went along. That's right.
The proper team won, and Shai played great. They could play again, and Luka could be better than Shai. It's not definitive,
of course,
but Shai has been better and is still in the tournament. So, what do you want me to say? Okay,
he's on the level. That's the point.
Fair. All right. So, Team USA. Let me just say first that on Wednesday, I had the opportunity to go with the members of Team USA to the American Military Cemetery here in Manila. I was not aware of the American Military Cemetery until I came here a couple of weeks ago. It is the largest cemetery for war dead other than Arlington National Cemetery in Northern Virginia. There are 9,000 soldiers buried in Normandy. There are 17,000 American soldiers buried at this incredible cemetery here in Manila. And there's another 36,000 names of missing, mostly from World War II, largely because of the losses at sea in the Pacific Theater. So the U.S. went there. They laid a wreath. They toured the cemetery. which is in absolutely pristine condition. They take incredible care of it. They had a tour guide a Filipino, there are some Filipinos who are buried and are missing, who fought in the war. Who is the tour guide's great grandfather was on the wall for being missing, and is a hero in the Philippines, and is actually one of the people who was on the Philippines currency. So it was a moving day. All the players came, all the coaches came. The head of the chairman of USA Basketball, I'm not sure of his exact title, chairman of the board, is General Martin Dempsey, who was a former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. When you're there with the ambassador and the Marine Guard and the former, head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, it's like, okay, we're talking serious business here. So the Americans got to do that during their 2 days off. They have such huge advantage of getting a little bit of an easier draw against Italy. They were a completely different team against Italy because they played way more focused ball coming out of the gates, rebounded better, but Italy is not anywhere near as good of a rebounding team as Lithuania. It played out. And they got to play. They've stayed in the same hotel the whole time. They've played in the arena the whole time, and now they have the rest advantage. They had 2 days off getting ready because Germany had to play on Wednesday. The U.S. played on Tuesday. Germany had to fly in from Japan on Monday. The U.S. has been here. There is a good feel around Team USA before this game, that they have sort of re-embraced their identity. Their team is built to be versatile and run and play high speed and exhaust itself, and then call the bullpen and bring in 5 outstanding NBA players and just beat you like that. They got away from that a little bit against Montenegro, who they beat, but not impressively. And then, of course, against Lithuania, when they were so fighting for the rebounds that they got away from their game. There was an interesting thing that happened after the win over Italy, which is that Anthony Edwards, he had 35 points against Lithuania in that loss. And I think he was 14 of 26. So certainly not a bad effort, not a bad efficiency game. And we talked the other day after the loss that he had some shots that could have gone in. He could have scored more. But after the game, against Italy, it sort of came out that the coaches and some players came to Anthony and said, hey, maybe look to move the ball a little bit more and not look for your shot, even though your shot was working, because he took 16 more shots than anybody else. And even though he played great, and Ant scored 3 points in the win over Italy. Mikal Bridges had the great game, 24 points, was just brilliant. And in the locker room, the players were saying that the happiest guy in the locker room was Ant. And so, I talked to him today at practice, Thursday at practice. And he said, look, that's what I got to do for the Timberwolves. Sometimes I have to score, sometimes I have to distribute. That's what I have to do here. So now when the Americans played the Germans 3 weeks ago in Abu Dhabi, the Germans got up by 16 points in that game. And it was largely because Dennis Schroeder was awesome, totally attacked off the dribble. And Ant basically won the U.S. that game. He had 34. So I got to imagine that the Germans are going to have a game plan ready. And so if they're going to put 2 on Anthony Edwards, which the Italians did a little bit, he's got to move that ball. And he did, and I think it showed some growth from him to, number one, for them to come to him and say, hey, listen, share the ball. 2, for him to be receptive and do it. He took 6 shots. He went from 26 to 6. And they went from losing by 6 to winning by 37. Not that the opponents were the same. So that's interesting. The other thing for Germany is, man, if you were watching Dennis Schroeder in this game, guys, Dennis Schroeder was 4 for 26 against Latvia. Do you know how hard it is to miss 22 shots in a game? He was also minus 20. Do you know how hard it is to win a game when your point guard is minus 20? Meanwhile, Franz Wagner, who's been out for 2 weeks with an ankle injury, just came back for this game, scored 16 points on 8 shots. He made 5 of 8 shots. He was plus 19. He had 18 fewer shots than Dennis. Dennis came within the skin of his teeth from dribbling and shooting Germany out of this game with a couple of preposterous possessions late in the game where he dribbled it out and chucked it.
You think the
Davis
coach
Bertans
is a little frustrated with Dennis? You saw the little squabble they had in the bench area, I believe, the previous game where he was trying to get Dennis to shut up and put his hand on his shoulder, and Dennis basically said, "Don't ever touch me like that again." Like, this is an interesting dynamic there.
Latvia had several hundred fans. They were totally engaged in it. Kristaps Porzingis is on the bench in flip-flops. Darius Bertans is one of their other better players, has been out. Two of their three best players are out. So Davis Bertans, now with the Thunder, had 20 points in the game, and he had a pretty good look from about 23, 24 feet at the buzzer to win.
Closer to 33 than 23.
Was it that far? Well, I was watching it.
I mean, listen, he's capable. Like, the guy is capable of hitting the shot. I don't necessarily fault the shot, but it was a long three.
It was still a shot if you're Latvia, you'll live with. If they came to this tournament and said, you're going to get a Davis Bertans makeable three to go to the Olympics, they would have signed up for their chances on that. Yeah,
and if you watch him, like, in his pregame warmups, like,
he could shoot it.
He hits them from 35, like some guys hit, mid-range jump shots.
Well, his point guard, this guy named Arturas, I think it's Arturas Skagers, I think is how you say his name.
We're gonna have just the entire just Baltic region just ready to murder us by the time this World Cup is over.
Well, first off, hats off to the Latvians for their fan
support. All of Eastern Europe, I should say, to clarify.
Well, number 55, this dude was awesome. He had made a couple of huge baskets. He was open. He had 24 points in the game, and I think he was like, "Come on." But anyway, I think it's Skagras.
Number 55.
Anyway, he was great. Hats off to him. But so I was talking to somebody from USA Basketball. I was like, wow, that Schroeder performance was unbelievable. And they were like, don't worry, by Friday he'll be Isaiah Thomas. And like the last time that he played against the US, he had 16 points and 10 assists. They need that guy. But Franz Wagner is a problem. If he had gotten even 12 shots versus 8, much less 15, 17, I think Germany wins by double digits, and I would suspect that that would happen against the US. So,
well, I will say this: you cannot go 4 of 26 without supreme confidence. Like,
he's got it
that poorly, and you keep on shooting. I don't think Germany's worried about the psyche of Dennis Schroeder. Oh my gosh, self-esteem going to be deflated? Trust me. He thinks the next one's going in.
Well, there was a bunch of Canadian fans there watching their new point guard with the Raptors. I'm not sure how they felt about that. But look,
they're watching that performance. They're saying, "What's the protection on that first round pick, we owe?"
Schroeder
there were more than 200 games, by the way, last year in the NBA with at least 26 shots taken, and the fewest anyone made was 7. So, just tells you, it's hard to do.
That said, Germany's undefeated. They're the only team that's undefeated. Steve Kerr was saying today he thinks that they've played the best in the cup. I don't think that's accurate because the Latvia game was not their best effort. But Schroeder gave the US, in the game that they played 3 weeks ago, they played drop coverage. So when they'd set a screen for him, Jaren Jackson would sort of back up, and Schroeder just went right into his body and created all kinds of problems. So I cannot see them playing drop coverage again. One thing that they did do to help get their speed and athleticism going, Steve Kerr brought out a half-court trap that they threw up against Italy. The Italians were not ready for it. It generated at least 3 or 4 turnovers and wrecked a couple other possessions. And I would not be surprised if they go back to that, although obviously Schroeder is a stronger ball handler and certainly a more confident ball handler than the Italian guards.
We've got an emergency trivia question here, courtesy of our friends at StatHead. I did a quick StatHead search here.
Okay.
I will.
What about the whiz of the quiz?
The last time. Okay. The short question is, who is the last player to to have at least 26 field goal attempts and make 4 or fewer in an NBA game? And I will give you the hint that it is a Hall of Famer.
Sorry, you cut out for a second on my end. What was the question there, Tim?
At least 26 field goal attempts in an NBA game, making 4 or fewer. Who's the last guy to do it? And the hint is it is a Hall of Famer.
I have 2 guesses: Allen Iverson, Kobe Bryant.
I was gonna say those 2 names. You said that's wrong.
Wrong. It is a Hall of Famer, and I will tell you, it was before the ABA-NBA merger.
Oh, God. Who's your guy? Bob Pettit.
Nope, not Bob Pettit. Nope. That'd be a great one.
I don't know. George.
I need a little bit more of a hint than before the merger. There's a few NBA players before the merger.
Okay,
it's somewhere between 47 and 76. Come on, you don't have it?
Okay, this guy's franchise recently signed the most high-profile minimum signing of the summer, who I think we're going to touch on here in a little bit.
And it wasn't George Mikan?
It was not George Mikan, but you're on.
I don't know.
I'm trying to think of which. I assume it's not Jerry West.
Jerry West.
I assume it's not Elgin Baylor.
Oh, it is Elgin Baylor.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Oh,
I was
wow.
going through Lakers Hall. I was going through Lakers Hall of Famers. But
Elgin Baylor actually had the last 2. He had a 3 of 27 and a 4 of 26.
Well, Dennis is in great company. Him and Elgin Baylor have something in common.
A Hall of Fame performance, bud.
All right. Well, before we talk about Christian Wood, I will say it could very well be Serbia beating Canada. The Canadians and the Americans are favored to play in the final. Anything could happen. I can make a case for any of these 4 teams winning, but I think Canada and the U.S. are the best teams. We'll see how Canada handles the pressure of expectation. If the U.S. takes care of business and plays their game, they should handle Germany, although I expect it to be a very challenging game. I expect there to be adversity. I expect the Germans to play much better than they did against Latvia. So they also are a big team. They out-rebounded the Americans last time. They do not – their rebounding isn't to the level of the Lithuanians or the Montenegrins who gave the Americans big trouble, but they have great size. And all you need to know is they bring a 7-footer in Mo Wagner off the bench. He's averaging 13 points. So if you bring an NBA player off the bench and he's also 7 feet, you're going to give the U.S. some trouble.
Wendy, we've got listeners all over the world, and a feller who I interacted with during my trip to Cologne reached out, and he wanted to help us on the pronunciation of the starting big man on Germany.
We need a lot of help with that.
I believe pronounced it Voigtman. No. The V is sharp like an F, and the I is silent. Something like Footman.
This is interesting you bring this up. So I had something happen at ESPN, and an internal memo was sent to me this week. A demand has been made of me because I've been derelict, and the ESPN wants a ruling on how to pronounce my last name. Because it's a German last name, and I was raised with Horst in German, that is pronounced with the U sound. So I was raised Windhorst, but phonetically over the course of years, people call it Windhorst. And to be honest with you, I don't care. But the problem is that after 13 years at ESPN, the powers that be have decided they've had enough, and there must be a declaration.
The truth is, Brian is such a big star that they need to know how to promote his name properly. So what are we deciding? This is breaking news.
I think it's fitting that he mispronounces his own last name.
So, the thing is, look, if you're going to make it a German pronunciation,
Wind,
you should say Windhorst, right? Is that something like that? Is it Dirk Nowitzki or is it Dirk Nowitzki?
It's Nowitzki, but he just kind of, all right, fine, Nowitzki, whatever.
Okay, right. So I'm saying, if I'm going to stick with the German pronunciation, I got it right. So
Yeah.
to be honest with you, my inclination is to say Windhorst, even though that's not, the way my grandmother on my father's side wanted it pronounced. But like, with all due respect to my dad, he's no longer with us, so I don't think he's going to complain. And I asked my 5-year-old son, I said, "How do you pronounce your last name?" And he pronounced it Windhurst because that's apparently how I've taught him. So I don't know. They want an answer. Like, I think they kind of wanted an answer immediately, but I haven't given it yet.
No, I think we should
But I
absolutely.
honestly, but I don't care. Seriously, I don't care, but I have to come up with one. And so now I have to care.
I think the mid-career change in pronunciation to Windhurst would it'll boost your profile. I'm gonna start
Hard pivot.
I'm gonna start calling you Vindy. Vindy.
That sounds Russian.
Man.
So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should take a poll of the Germans in the crowd tomorrow. I'm only 1/4 German, but that's the name. So like, I don't know. I'm taking Jackson. I mean, I don't read the comments. Maybe Jackson can tell me what the comments say. Hurst or Horst? Which should it be?
No, I want that.
That's not happening. I'm not looking for that. Okay, Christian Wood signed with the Lakers, minimum contract plus a player option. Always got to love the mid-September signing. We've talked quite a bit about Christian Wood on this podcast. A year ago, he netted a first-round pick from the Mavericks, trading for him from the Rockets. You're on the front line of the Christian Wood situation, MacMahon. There's a lot of Christian Wood is from Southern California. He is, I think, tweeted or put on Instagram or whatever how excited he is to be a Laker. He's talked about his relationship with Darvin Ham when they were both in Milwaukee. There's people, thinking that the Lakers just signed a 20-10 guy. He is very talented. There's no doubt. He puts up big numbers. There's no doubt. And he was a free agent who got the minimum on September 6th. So, MacMahon, what do you think?
Well, shout out to his agent, Adam Pensack, for getting him that player option. It essentially serves as a no trade clause, some shrewd negotiating there. Christian did send delivered a message through our buddy Hall of Famer Mark J. Spears. Quote, "I've always wanted to be a Laker. I know we can win a championship. Communication with the coach is a big key. Coach Ham and I go back to our Milwaukee days, and we've had great conversations every day about this opportunity. He believes in me and told me I'll be playing a big role and knows what I can do. I'm looking forward to this, and for sure," that's capital FASURE, motivated after what Dallas did. So
what did Dallas do? Not re-sign him?
What Dallas, honestly, Christian Wood and the people who he listens. The worst thing a lot of NBA players do is surround themselves with people who only tell them what they want to hear. What Christian Wood wanted to hear is, "You're an all-star, you're an all-star, you're an all-star." Dude, no, you're not. You're not. You have a chance to be a phenomenal bench scorer in the NBA. That's what the league thinks your potential is. The Mavericks tried to put him in that role. He pouted and moped. And it was just Jason Kidd did not want Christian Wood. That trade was made without J. Kidd signing off on it. Now, listen, J. Kidd did sign off on the JaVale McGee signing, so let's not act like, he's the end-all be-all in terms
and promising him a starting job.
Yes. So, he's got blood on his hands from last summer as well. But that trade was as much about clearing out roster spots. Remember, the Mavs sent 4 into the roster guys to Houston as it was about getting Christian Wood. It was like, okay, let's get off these rosters. Let's open up some roster spots. Now, one of those they used on JaVale McGee, another they used on to sign Theo Pinson. They didn't capitalize on the roster spots. That was the motivation. I don't think they necessarily wanted a guaranteed a guaranteed first round rookie deal on the books at that time either. The simple fact of the matter is this: Christian Wood, if you look at his numbers, boy, man can score. He can score in a lot of different ways, efficiently, right? He puts up nice numbers. Nobody wants to keep him when they've had him, right? Milwaukee's had him. They didn't want him back. They're trying to win. New Orleans had him. They didn't want him. The Rockets are trying to win again. They sure as hell didn't want to bring him back. By the way, the Rockets tried to trade him for a full year. The Mavericks were the first team to offer a pick. Not a first-round pick, a pick. They didn't have a second round.
Detroit could have re-signed him and instead signed and traded him, right?
Look, he's going to be 28 in a couple of weeks. He's going to be on his 8th team.
Yeah. And he's been 6'10" and skilled his whole career. This ain't new.
I mean, I would just say that the Lakers obviously – the Lakers don't need a lot from this spot. I mean, but I've seen some people say, "Oh, like he could start and have Anthony Davis play 4." I would be stunned if that happened. But
this is the
they're not asking him to play 30 minutes here.
Well, this is the interesting thing, though. And the whole everything coming out of the Lakers this summer has been the Lakers get Jackson Hayes, the Lakers get Christian Wood. Now Anthony Davis doesn't have to play center. He doesn't want to play center. He can play power forward. The Lakers are not nearly as good when Anthony Davis plays power forward. They're best off when he's at center and LeBron's at power forward. That's when they're at their best. And if they're going to have 30 to 35 to 40 minutes a game now where Jackson Hayes and Christian Wood are playing, that, I believe, will be a net negative for the Lakers because that will mean Anthony Davis will not be playing center.
The guy that they signed who's going to play is a guard, Gabe Vincent.
Yeah.
That's the guy who they signed who's going to get minutes. And by the way,
well, that's what I'm saying, though. I think Jackson Hayes
Austin Reeves is a freaking stud. Let's talk about, you want to talk about the Lakers going to get better. Talk about how good Austin Reeves is.
Well, yeah. I mean, we've talked about him all summer, but I do think if you believe what the Lakers are saying through their actions and sort of what people have said about them and what they've done this summer, I think Jackson Hayes and Christian Wood are both going to play. And I don't think that's a good thing for them. And are they going to play that way during the regular season to try to reduce the wear and tear on AD and then come playoff time AD? Because look, you're not getting through Joker if freaking Christian Wood's playing center. Give me a break. It's not happening. Well, the West is so difficult this year that it's going to be hard to play a less optimal style and win games. Look, I know the Lakers were, what were they, the 7 seed last year and made the conference finals. Like I understand they did that. That's not a quality path to having the kind of success this team wants to have. You want to have home court advantage in the first round, or at least the first round or two of the playoffs, if not more than that, with how deep the West is going to be this year. You don't want to be in the play-in mix where if Rudy Gobert had played for Minnesota in that game, who knows if they even win the first play-in game. Maybe everything's different for them. But yeah, I don't know. This seems like it's setting up for Anthony Davis to play a lot of minutes at power forward. And if he does that, instead of playing at center where he is at his best, especially when now he's not much of a shooter anymore, I just really don't like that very much for the Lakers, despite this being him and Jackson Hayes both being minimum signings, or in theory, there's not a lot of risk. I don't like the fit if he's not playing center.
Well, and I would like to hear, and we will, I'm sure, come media day, more about this quote unquote big role that Darvin Ham has apparently promised Christian Wood. I will say one thing. I do think that Jason Kidd, and I think Christian alluded to this, I think Jason Kidd mismanaged this from a communication standpoint. J. Kidd basically didn't want him, didn't want to deal with him, didn't really communicate with him directly. There was the whole thing at media day last year where J. Kidd confirms, which was pretty obvious, the plan was to bring C. Wood off the bench. C. Wood comes in media day and he's like, it's the first I heard of it. And so we asked J-Kid to practice the next day about that. And J-Kid's like, I didn't tell him, but like my assistants have talked to him. And, when we're saying, hey, when you come in the game, 6 minutes, at the 6-minute mark of the first quarter, that means you are coming off the bench. Anyway, so it just got off to this wonky start from a communication perspective. So my advice to Darvin Ham is be very direct and very specific. And like, I wouldn't promise this guy minutes. You want to play minutes for a team that wants to contend? Play defense, right? Like, don't blow defensive assignments on a regular basis. You're going to block the occasional shot. It's not what I'm talking about. You've got assignments.
Well, look,
don't watch those on a regular basis. But like, he averaged 26 minutes a game last year for the Mavericks. That's not a big role. You're getting a bigger role than that
big.
in LA.
Well, look, they invested heavily in Rui Hachimura to play for them. Okay. And Jared Vanderbilt, I don't know how big of a role he's going to have, but Jared Vanderbilt really helped them last year. Those guys are going to play.
Yeah.
And they signed Taurean Prince, who, I don't know how much he's going to play, but he's a rotation player.
Well,
and he's 3-4.
If AD plays most of his minutes at the 5, I think that will be a very good thing for the Lakers. If he doesn't, and Jackson Hayes and Christian Wood are combining to play 30 minutes a game or more, I think that's going to be a net negative. But and we'll see which way it goes. I don't know how it's going to go.
For the Lakers, though, this is again, the talent's not in question. The guy can absolutely score. For a minimum signing, it's a fine flyer. If it doesn't work out, you get rid of them, and you got to pay.
It'd be a fine flyer without the player option.
Yeah, the player again. I don't like. Where was he going if you didn't give him that player option? Like, who was lining up here? But whatever.
I've had get off my lawn on this one for years now, where I just said, back when I was a kid, that superstars got player options, not guys on minimums. But that's not getting it is like the exception more than the rule these days. So
yeah, and again, like, there's just not a market for this guy. That's how you end up signing a minimum deal in September. And trust me, the Mavericks.
Well, I'm not sure. I guess I'm not 100% certain if he didn't have another offer.
Okay,
there's a reason why this lasts until September. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
And Lakers are in position. He wanted to play for the Lakers. So that was the key.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Second straight summer, he's got a chance to prove he can contribute to a winner. It didn't happen last year in Dallas. He scored points.
That wasn't a winner. That wasn't a winner.
Yeah. And so, we'll see.
By the way, speaking of Dallas last year, it was interesting watching Dwight Powell on the other side of some Luka complaining in that game.
It's happened in plenty of scrimmages. By the way, Dwight Powell, Mavericks fans, a lot of them love Christian Wood, couldn't stand Dwight Powell. Simple fact of the matter is the Mavericks are a better team offensively and defensively with Powell on the floor than they were with C. Wood. Make of that what you will.
Well, and Dwight Powell is re-signed, and Christian Wood is in LA. Okay, thank you for listening to Hoop Collective Podcast. Got some big games coming up. Bontemps, enjoy your Italy trip, and thanks for taking a little time out here to keep the pod going.
Of course.
MacMahon, get back to that book writing. Get ready a chapter on the 2023 World Cup here.
I'm counting on you to provide that for me. Adios, amigos.
All right, we'll talk. Sorry, I talked over you twice. One more time.
Adios, amigos. I'd say it in German, but I don't know how.